Hey everyone, welcome to another session. Today we have Suraj with us from co-founder. He's co-founder at Leadle, GTM and Allbound AI agency that has been in business for over 8+ years and has worked with over 300 plus startups. They send over million plus emails every month, and they are doing almost quarter of a million leads or prospecting of quarter of a million leads every month. So that's a huge number. And today, that's what we are going to talk about with Suraj, which is how can you prospect around 250,000 leads every month, segment them, and use the data to personalize the emails to be sent. So thank you very much, Suraj, for joining us. If you can tell us a bit about yourself to get started.
Hey, Sushant. Hi. Thanks for having me on your session, your podcast. Yeah, so we've been running Leadle for the last 8 years. We worked with a lot of startups, and we primarily help them with early stage go to market. And right now, for upmarket startups, especially SaaS and IT companies, we help them with their all-bound setup, right? Because when you grow as a company, you don't depend on just one channel for revenue. So yeah, so that's what we do.
Very interesting. So, all-bound is not a term that I have heard so much. Can you explain it a bit? Like, what channels do you use for startups?
Yeah, so Allbound is basically you integrate your revenue channels. Like outbound is just one method, right? So you have your inbound channels, you have partnerships, you have even within inbound, you have performance marketing, you have SEO, you have content marketing, etc. So usually for every company, this runs in silos, right? It's not running in an integrated manner, and usually the salesperson doesn't know what the marketing team is doing. The marketing guy doesn't know what the salesperson is doing. And ideally, it will be a lot better if they all know what's going on. So we're just calling it all bound. It's something that got picked up. I don't know when, where on LinkedIn, but it just seems like a very sensible name to be given to such a thing.
Absolutely, yeah. Now that you say it, it makes absolute sense. So, awesome. So, let's get started. I have a couple of questions for you, Suraj. So, firstly, let's start with segmenting. So, what methods and criteria do you use to effectively segment B2B leads for your, cold email outreach?
Yeah. So it's the usual. First, you have the usual lot, right? Like generally, people start with industries, then they do some kind of growth stage parameters, like have they gotten funding, where are they in terms of their revenue, and then you also pick up the different personas that make sense for you to reach out. Personally, I have seen most companies just start with this; they'll sort of limit it to this, right? But I think when you add signals to the segmentation, like are they using a particular technology? If there is an account that is not using a CRM versus using a CRM, the messaging needs to be different. If there is somebody, even within CRMs, if they're using Salesforce versus HubSpot versus Pipedrive, that indicates again something else, right? So when you segment, I think apart from the basic segmentation that everybody does, I think it is important to add like tech and non-tech signals, and add to that the third stage is your behavioral segmentation that can be done, where tools like Warmly, RB2B and all play a role, where it helps you really zero in on whether there is some kind of intent.
So, other than RB2B and Formally, what other tools can be used by startups to better segment the data? Because you're right, most of the times companies would just segment on the industry and maybe on the employee headcount, right? And then they just send the email to either the CEO or VP or something. So, what are some other non-tech signals or behavioral patterns, and what are some of the tools that can be used to, identify these?
Yeah. See, even for employee size, I think it's a misleading thing, right? Like if you're targeting D2C or e-commerce companies, usually those companies will be very small, but they will be doing like a lot more in terms of business. So I think employee size is not really a great indication of segmentation. Instead, if you go for specific team sizes, I think that's a better indication. Like it helps me understand more, when I know that there are less than 5 SDRs or 10 SDRs or 15 SDRs versus just having an employee count of their 50 employee company that doesn't tell me anything. That is one thing. And the second thing is there is no one size fits all when it comes to segmenting, right? You have like multiple ways to segment, and you segment it on the basis of what your ICP is. Our B2B and Warmly are basically, they help you de-anonymize visitors. Like even Factors also falls under the same category, right? But segmentation happens at a very early stage. When you're talking pure outbound, it's basically one of the first steps that you do. So you take a platform like Clay, and then you can probably do lookalikes using Ocean. You do lookalikes, and then you pick up that list that becomes a cohort, and then you can run an outreach campaign cadence for that. And once that is set up, you can look at a more tech oriented segmentation, saying that, okay, I want to target companies that are using WebEngage and Salesforce and have less than 5 SDRs. So now what it helps me achieve is it helps me keep my value proposition really focused. I'm not talking something that is very general. And even if I have like a non-personalized templated email that I'm sending them, it is still relevant for that particular cohort because I'm writing content for a company that uses WebEngage, Salesforce, and has less than 5 SDRs, right? And this is where your personalization, is already there in the email. Like you don't have to really look for a one-line personalization at the beginning of the email. Your entire email is relevant for that person because you've done the research part and you've written the content for that particular segment.
Right. And that would in turn translate into better replies and engagement as well in the meeting. So after this process of really segmenting and personalizing the emails right way, what kind of reply rate can someone expect or should someone expect?
I think if you have like a campaign, which I think it should have like a bare minimum reply rate of at least 2%. So,
Okay.
and this is for small volume campaigns. If you're doing really large volumes, then your response rate can be even as low as 0.5 or 1% or 1.5%, right? But I have seen reply rates, and by reply rates, I mean like it doesn't include obviously the out of office responses. It includes negative, neutral, and positive replies, right? And that can be, if you're doing a very niche segmented campaign, your replies can, I have seen a low point of 1.5 to 2% and go as high as even 4%.
Wow, that sounds really interesting. So that's how we segmented. Once, let's say we have segmented based on certain parameters, both tech and non-tech and behaviors. So now how do we use this data for, to personalize the emails? Can you give some examples for a few segments that we were just talking about?
Yeah. So let's probably let's look at the sales side of things itself, right? Like if you look at transcription and recording and conversation intelligence, if we take that category, there are many tools starting from Fireflies, which is like anybody can sign up and start using, to Gong, right? Which is really like an enterprise SaaS product. So let's say you're selling a product that is in this space. Then what you need to get right in the beginning is, who are you selling to? Are you selling to a startup? Are you selling to an SMB or a mid-market customer or an enterprise customer? Because based on this, your ticket size is going to differ. The roles that you're going to target is going to differ. And also the value prop that you're going to probably add to your content is also going to differ. So if you take this, if you take the conversation intelligence space, the bad way to do it would be to just look at Gong as the market leader, go to G2, pick up all the customers who are using Gong, and basically write to them saying, hey, I'm a Gong alternative. That is a sure shot way to fail. Because one, you haven't done your competitor research, because you know that Gong customers are pretty loyal and it's a kick-ass product, right? And you don't know whether the product is enterprise ready. So you need to figure out where your product fits. It starts with positioning.
What is unique about your product, which can be positioned, something that is missing from Gong in a way?
Not, maybe missing from Gong. So even there, I wouldn't jump in and say, hey, you take my product and you can stop using Gong. Because Gong is largely used by enterprises, and enterprises are very careful when they switch products because they have to get a lot of people to adopt to any product. So a better way of personalizing there. So we were talking about personalization, right? So what I would do is I would pick up companies, even if I'm picking up companies that are using Gong, I would look at some more signals. How many SDRs are there? How many AEs are there? And that will probably give me an understanding of the SDR to AE ratio, right? And then Gong is a pretty expensive product, so I am relatively reasonably sure that they're using Gong for the AEs and not the SDRs. Do people have an SDR problem? Generally. And the problem there is it's easy to hire one or two good SDRs, but when you're really looking to hire like a team of 10, 15, 20 people, that when you scale, ramping up becomes a problem. So you need to train. And for training, you need a tool that helps you, record the best calls that can be used for training. And Gong is an expensive option. So you basically say, hey, I noticed you're using Gong, and then highlight that you're probably not using it for SDRs. Would you like to use this for SDRs? Would you like to use this for your customer success team? You'll know what your customers are saying. Or the other
Yeah,
option
makes
is to
sense.
piggyback on, the other option is to piggyback on Gong and say you can use this on top of Gong.
Right.
Right. But
Right. And
this content is specifically for Gong users, right? I can't send the same email to somebody using Chorus or somebody using a Fireflies, right? Somebody using Fireflies is already using a product which is like $10, $12 a seat. So there's no point in me saying this. So I'll have to come up with a different value proposition. So here what happens is, instead of going and using, when people talk about personalization in email, they talk about that one line when they start the email, which is usually gimmicks. It's like, I saw this LinkedIn post, it was wonderful, and then move into a pitch which has no relation to the personalization, right? So I believe that it's better to send uh, relevant emails without personalization, like personalization which has no relevance. It's better to send emails that are segmented to a cohort which does not have a variable personalization, rather than trying to write that one line personalization just for the sake of it.
yeah, that makes absolute sense, because if someone has posted about their new job change, or they completed a certificate maybe, or something like that, and you suddenly say, hey, congratulations on the job change, but are you looking for this software for XYZ? So that does not really correlate as such. And yeah, that is almost useless. And I think people also catch these days that, okay, this is done by some kind of AI or something. That's why. So just the other day, I got an email which basically said, the subject line was, I wrote a poem for you. And there was a complete poem written for me, like, hey, Sushant, blah, blah, blah. It was a cold email in a poem format, and there was a ask in the end. And I knew that no one is going to spend 1 hour in writing a poem for me. Obviously, this has been written with something like ChatGPT.
Yeah. So I think it's okay to use tools like, obviously, see, we also use OpenAI tokens to personalize emails for that every individual. So if I'm sending out 60 emails to 60 different prospects, all 60 will be unique, right? We look for certain information. We are able to scrape information from Google News within Clay. We are able to look for relevant industry information. We pick a lot of signals. We have like some 18 to 20 signals that we can look at, which is like somebody has been promoted recently, somebody has been hired recently. Job change is also a great signal. But every signal doesn't mean that you use that signal as a personalization line in your email.
Yes.
Right? The signal means you can target them. Doesn't mean you have to say it out loud in an email. Like
Yeah.
recently, I saw one email that worked when one of our guys wrote this. He went sort of against everything that's happening. Like, everybody's trying to personalize and try to write that first line that, especially like they make it sound like we're very, really close friends and there's a lot of pleasantries. So his first line was like, well, everybody's trying to do this. I'm only here to sell. And then he starts pitching. He's getting responses for that because he's just being genuine. Hey, I'm just here to sell. Right?
Yeah, that makes sense. And that's a very good point, because what I've seen a lot of times is that almost all these tools these days give a job change option, or, hiring, which companies are hiring for specific job roles. So you don't need to go on their face and ask, hey, are you hiring for this? And then pitch. You can just directly pitch your service, assuming that your segmentation and your list building is good enough, that you know that these people who are already hiring for this kind of a role might need a software like this or a service like this.
Yeah.
So just go with that and don't use it on the face. So yeah, that's a good advice for sure. Nice. So next question, Suraj, would be that how do you balance automation and manual personalization cold emails, especially when you're using all these dynamic fields or templates, because emails going out at scale still needs to feel personal. So you touched upon it a bit, like using Clay for that, but if you can elaborate a bit more on that.
So, see, the only difference I think between, AI and us right now is we can think better. I mean, AI has also started thinking very recently. I think today I read a message where somebody had posted saying ChatGPT initiated a conversation with them. So usually it's we initiate conversations and it responds, right? But basis previous data, I think it initiated a conversation, with someone. I saw that on Insta today. I don't know whether it's real or not. But yeah, see, I feel like about I don't think you can 100% automate because I don't think we are there yet. I think about when it comes to email content and personalization, I like to do as much automation as possible um, before sending out the email, right? So I don't want I don't want my email to be riddled with variables, right? Because that increases the chances of that email reading very bad. So I want to make sure that there is very little. There can be, I'm not talking about, hey, first name, that's like very basic. So I'm talking about, first names are not generally clean. You need to clean them. And people have seen sit and manually clean them, and it's prone to human error. So you can actually auto clean it within Clay, making sure that you get a clean first name. That's like one of the basic things. The other thing is you shouldn't be writing emails where the entire email is written by Clay, written by GPT or Claude or Anthropic, one of those LLMs. I don't think it should be written completely by those tools through automation, because then at the end you have no idea what's going on. I think you should give a framework and have very little points which are just data points that get filled up. You pick this that just comes and sits in your email. I think that's what is good automation. What we do is, instead of getting the tool to write emails altogether, we make sure that we segment, right? There's a lot of automation happening in the segmentation stage. Right? So we have a lot of cohorts that we create. Like every week, we run a new cohort for every client. Right? So this week, if I'm reaching out to a cohort 1, that's going to run for like, 10 days, 10 to 14 days, because it covers all channels. There's cold calling, there's email, and then LinkedIn as well. But next week, while this cohort is running, I've already set up a new cohort. And the content is written for that cohort, which means largely the body of the email is already written in a manner that resonates for that segment. But a few data points here and there which get picked up using the signals that we have picked up in the cohort, they get filled up. Like, I noticed that you removed this particular technology. That is a good, thing to have in the email itself. I know that you're using this. I noticed that, if I'm writing to a VP of sales, I'm writing saying, I noticed that you have, about 10 SDRs in your team. So that 10 SDRs in your team, I can pick it up. Like I can enrich it using Clay, and that field can go into the email, right? But I shouldn't have to write the entire email using OpenAI or Claude.
Yeah, makes sense. So you're talking about more like something which is an email template and it has personalization variables or macros. Different tools have different names for them or dynamic fields, right? And you just input them in the emails. Am I correct here to understand?
Yeah, we also do that one-line personalization if relevant data is available. And see, people talk so much about personalization, but the reality is, if you take 100 prospects, only 20 of them will be posting on LinkedIn, right? 80
Yeah,
of them
that's true.
won't be posting on LinkedIn. So what's the point of saying, hey, you can do this using LinkedIn personalization? What about the majority of people for whom you can't personalize? You'll have to
Yeah,
personalize.
majority of
Yeah.
the people won't even have a updated
Yeah.
about us section on the
Yeah.
LinkedIn. So
Exactly.
you don't have much there.
Yeah. So if you have to talk about the majority, you really can't do this, the traditional kind of personalization that is spoken about. How you need to personalize it is sort of do the segmentation and build right cohorts and set up emails that have very little variables, but meaningful variables, and then send out the emails. That should work, because according to me, even I have seen a very average kind of email work if your targeting is correct. But it doesn't
I
matter if you do all kinds of personalization and your segment and your ICP is wrong, it won't work.
Right. Makes sense. So while we're on this topic of, email templates, according to you, what's like the best length for subject line of email template and then body of email template?
There are varying opinions on this. If you ask me and my co-founder itself, we will have differing opinions. I think it's a matter of personal preference. Um,
So
I like
I
to
would rephrase it as, what have you seen performing the best in terms of the combination of subject line and email body? How many words should it be?
Okay. So again, there is no one single answer to this because if you're targeting, I'll tell you, if you're targeting SaaS companies, go keep everything short because they are oversaturated, right? Like everybody is reaching out to them. They don't have time to read everything. And there are so many emails clogging up the inbox. So as short as possible, like your subject line should be visible I don't even have to open your email to be able to read the subject line fully. And then your email content, generally what I have seen works, especially this is also market specific. Like in India, I've seen longer emails work. In the US, I've seen only shorter emails work. And even in the US, if you reach out to segments like hospitals and manufacturing and engineering, longer emails work. But if you reach out to SaaS and IT, more tech savvy companies, shorter emails work. Right. So it's largely dependent on your audience. You write to your audience. I have seen cases where you send a long ass message on LinkedIn, which I would never do. But that has given us meetings because the ICP appreciated that kind of detail in the message. But this wouldn't work if you're reaching out to a VP of sales in a SaaS company.
Right. So this is a very interesting observation, Suraj, for sure, because from the most of the conventional wisdom that we have seen, everyone just says that keep your email very short, 100 words, 80 words, and so on. But this makes absolute sense because in some markets like India and enterprise companies or enterprise organizations like hospitals and manufacturing and all, absolutely, I do understand that they would prefer more of a long format. They would prefer if we send a PDF in the first go itself, right?
True.
So
Yeah,
that
yeah,
they have
yeah.
a complete idea about the company and organization that is sending them the emails.
True. And it also differs on the basis of, see, I have seen when you target the retail segment in the US, they want specific case studies where you are able to provide specific quantitative numbers, right? Whereas when you're targeting healthcare, they're okay to read a white paper, right? So I
Right.
need to know what works. I can't go in with a one size fits all, like somebody's telling on LinkedIn saying, keep your emails short. I'll be writing 50-word emails and it will not be working because the audience wants to read more. Probably the reader is looking at it as like, this has nothing. Like, why would I go on a call with this person? Like, it has nothing.
Yeah. So on that note, what we have seen being done a lot at SalesBlink is that instead of asking for a call or even a soft CTA in the first email, what people have started doing a lot is adding some kind of a sales asset. So it can be a video sales letter, it can be something like a PDF or some white paper maybe that they ask if they can send. They
Mhm.
don't send it right away.
Okay.
They ask if they can send it. So, what kind of experience have you had with them, and which type of segments do you think that can work for?
So we've seen companies that are expanding manufacturing units, right? There is a lot of interest in reading industry reports, white papers, anything that is, companies that are heavily regulated and have a lot of regulatory compliance, etc. They're always on the lookout for information like this, right? But if you look at segments that are bombarded with emails and messages on a daily basis, they want shorter versions of everything. If I'm reaching out to, like if I were to write an email to you, trying to sell my service, or probably if you were to write an email to me, I think both of us should keep it really short, like 60 words max, and try to pack in a punch within that a number of words. Right? But if you're um, going really large enterprise, but not really a saturated segment, you'll have to try out these things to see what works because there's no real one size fits all thing. And what I like to do is I like to have at least 5, 6 variants in my first step. So when I'm doing A/B testing, I want to have at least 6 versions in the first step because everybody knows that you get the maximum number of responses for the first step. And as you go more and more down the cadence, chances of a response is reducing. And so I like to have at least 6 A, B, C, D, F till A to F variants in the first email, because that helps me test more in a shorter period of time.
Right, and that's an interesting take. So, coming on testing and optimizing your sequence. So, your first email has 6 variations. Now, what is the minimum number of leads that you would test these 6 with? Because there has to be some lead data as well to, go ahead and check for 6 different variations. So, what would be the minimum number of leads that you would check this for?
So it depends on the size of the audience. So if I'm running an ABM campaign, then the sample size need not be that large, because the overall TAM itself is like very small. But if you're talking about large scale email outreach, large volume outreach where the TAM is a lot, like I can do even like I can do even like 1 lakh prospects, 100,000 prospects in a month. If that is the case, I would still want to get at least one. If it's email, I would want to get at least like one positive reply for 800 people that I send an email to, right? Because and I've seen like campaigns that perform really well, and the product, there is like very good product market fit. I have seen like one positive reply for every 300 emails as well, 300 contacts. So I think the sweet spot is anywhere between 300 to 800. Anything above 800, something is wrong. You have to fix it.
Right. You either have the wrong list or the wrong messaging for the list. So that should be checked.
Yeah. See, I think
Interesting.
there are 3 things that we need to look out for, right? And today it has changed. Like if you had asked me this question like 3-4 years later, 3-4 years earlier, I would have said like the first most important thing is your ICP and persona, and then your content, right? But today the number one thing that you need to get right is your infrastructure, especially if you're doing emails. Because let's say you get your infrastructure wrong, you get your list right and your email right, you're still sending emails into a black hole. Nobody's reading it.
Yeah.
You need to get your infrastructure right. Then you need to get your list right, and last is your offer or your content. Because I have seen where cases infrastructure is correct, list is amazingly segmented, average content also works. Right? Like by average content, I mean there is no personalization, nothing. It's just a direct, hey, I do this. Do you have this problem? I can solve it for you. It's like a very direct email, right?
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Because when the infrastructure is correct, then the emails are at least going to the inbox. So your
Correct.
chances of getting a response automatically increase. What would you recommend, Suraj, as infrastructure? What kind of infrastructure do you guys use at Leadle?
So we use a lot of tech. So and so we in terms of so Clay is at the center of everything, obviously, and Clay is connected to whatever CRM that we use, whether it's HubSpot or Pipedrive, or depends. So Clay with the CRM, there's obviously a two-way sync, but purely with respect to outbound outreach, for emails, we use Smart Lead and Instantly. For LinkedIn, we use HeyReach, and for cold calling, I think we use a bunch of tools. Because for India, we use Nolarity. For outside India, for dialing to Western markets, we use Just Call and Call Hippo. And obviously,
Right.
for setting up the email infrastructure, etc., we use MailDozer.
So how has your experience with Mailed also been
Yeah, so
so
far so
far?
good.
Because that's one tool that I think has just come up. So these infrastructure tools are very, very new, right?
Yeah. So
I don't think they were there 1 year ago.
Yeah.
So I think you must have tried some different infrastructure tools as well. So how has your experience been? How did you find these different or maybe better than something like Gmail or Outlook?
See, we actually do use Gmail and Outlook even today, because it doesn't make sense in putting everything in just like one place. Because if something goes off, all our campaigns take a hit. So we manually maintain Microsoft inboxes. We do have manually maintained Google Workspace inboxes as well. We wanted to try something as a infrastructure platforms. I think we evaluated MailForge. There was also one more that I don't remember the name of the product, but we did evaluate 3-4 tools in the market. It's just that from a utilization perspective and from a pricing perspective, and so far from a deliverability perspective also, I think MailDoso is working pretty well.
Yeah. Nikita from Mail Doso is also joining us for another podcast
Okay.
episode real soon. So yeah, I did hear that they are doing great stuff with this.
Yeah.
Right. So my next question, Suraj, is that can you share a few case studies where cohort-based segmentation and personalization significantly improved your campaign's performance?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So I can give you an example of our own service offerings. And I think I already gave one regarding conversation intelligence, right? See, that was like a real example that I gave, that we worked in this space for 2, 3 clients over the last 2, 3 years. And in every case, see, because that segment is very oversold too, there are a lot of products in that segment. So you need to really come up with something different when you are segmenting, right? And there are many ways to segment, especially when it's a mature category, because you have so many competitors, you have so many people using different products, so many different problems to solve with the same solution. And we run these campaigns, we don't assume anything in the beginning. When we start a campaign, we start with the most basic setup. Like we will do a very direct outreach and we will run canned messages in the beginning, because hey, if canned messages work, why do you need to personalize? Right? Because it's easy. Like I don't need to teach anybody to personalize. My problem solution fit or my product market fit is so strong, I don't have to personalize. I can just send a direct emailer and everybody resonates with that direct email. No personalization. I'm happily selling. And why would I complicate things when I don't need to? So we always start with a direct approach as one variant. When the direct approach doesn't work, we look for segments, how we can break up and run these campaigns. Even for us, right? Earlier we used to do only appointment setting. Then we started doing go to market and appointment setting. And appointment setting is for companies that have established PMF. And go to market is for companies who are doing this for the first time. There is no PMF that has been established, because the approach itself has to be very different for the two. And thirdly, because we are doing this Allbound implementation for Series A plus companies now, our segmentation itself varies, right? Like I can do Allbound implementation for a Series B kind of company that is doing about, let's say, 20 million in 10 to 20, maybe even 5 to 10 million in revenue, right? What I'm going to say to that founder or VP of sales or head of marketing is going to be very different from if I'm going to write for Cisco or a Dell or an Intel, because there they they will have a marketing team, they will have a sales team, but they will still be working in silos, right? The bigger the company, the bigger the problem. True, they will have CRMs like Salesforce, and they'll have a separate SFDC environment, etc. So the bigger the company, the bigger the problem. But when I'm trying to sell my solution, I can't have like a one size fits all, right? So when I'm targeting Series A companies, I'm talking about growing without adding headcount. But when I'm targeting an upmarket company, it is not really about growing without adding headcount, right? The problem is something else.
Yeah, makes sense. So, have you seen difference between sending cold emails or doing outbound for a company which has not found a product market fit versus a company which has found product market fit? So basically, we are talking about a GTM stage company and a PMF reach stage company.
Yeah. So
So,
if you
what's the
have
difference in basically segmenting and personalization there?
So I think the fundamental difference when you're doing when you have identified or validated PMF, when you have hit PMF, it means that you've validated three things. You validated the value proposition for that particular role that you're selling to in that particular industry, right? These three things, if you have ticked and if you've been able to sell through outbound or inbound, whatever, and you have basically hit PMF. So then you would have run some kind of campaign, right? Like you would have maybe reached out to 2000 people and you got like this pipeline. So what you need to try to do is replicate that effort or even better it. If you have PMF, you're ready to sell. But if you don't have PMF, you shouldn't even be selling. You should be validating.
Yeah.
So writing an email like you're trying to sell pre-PMF is a sure shot way to commit like suicide as a product, right?
Right.
Because you should be asking them for feedback. You should be asking them, hey, can you come and take a look at my product and tell me if I'm actually solving this problem for you? Instead of saying, I solve this problem for you and try to sell it, because you don't know.
Yeah.
So it's in the CTA, there needs to be a difference, right? If you're post PMF, you can have your soft CTA, hard CTA, whatever it is, but you're trying to sell. But if you're pre PMF, you're still validating whether this problem is being solved with your audience. So ask your audience for a feedback session, user interview. And if you have BMF, your interview will move into a demo, right? And
Yeah.
you'll automatically create a pipeline even without trying to sell.
So, Suraj, this also gets me to another question. So, you have worked with a lot of SaaS companies, a lot of startups, right, over the last 8 years. Who is cold email not for? So, is there a specific ACV, a specific LTV below which it doesn't make any sense, or any kind of low touch, high touch SaaS? So, what kind of a B2B company does it not make sense for?
So if you're doing only cold email, you better be sure you have like a really large channel. Okay. Um, See, you take other two channels, you take cold calling and LinkedIn. If you have a kick-ass caller, they're going to get you at least like one meeting for every 100 or worst case 200 dials. LinkedIn, it's not really a channel where you push out messages and sell, right? Because you have like okay, you can send only so many invites on a weekly basis. You can't really scale as much as email. The fundamental advantage that email gives you is running this at scale. So if you don't have
Right.
an audience that you can tap using that scale, then that's not your channel. You're better off doing something else.
Right.
That is like one of the fundamental areas where I don't think cold email works.
Awesome. And my last question, how do you foresee the future of cold outreach and personalization and segmentation, and how do you see the market evolving, let's say, over the next 5 years?
I don't think anything that I say will change in like the next 60 days. Like if we were to have this conversation in the next 45 to 60 days, I bet I'll give you another answer. Because I remember when we closed last year for our Christmas holidays, we
Uh,
we made some plans for the new year, right? Like what tech stack are we going to use? How are we going to deliver this? We came back in Jan and we basically trashed the entire thing and redid our whole thing because a lot of things changed in those just 3 weeks. But some things I believe will happen is I think the role of the SDR will still be there, but I don't think it will be called the SDR. I think you need it to be more like a growth hacker kind of a role who manages this entire set of systems, cold email, cold calling, cold LinkedIn or social on LinkedIn, who understands a little bit of content marketing. It becomes like an all-bound role, right? Because if you think about it, if you're able to automate 70% of this process, cold outreach, and understand, if you're able to run outbound led inbound or inbound led outbound, you just need one smart person to manage this entire thing. I'm not talking about AEs, I'm talking about just execution. Because see,
right.
can you prospect automatically? You can. Can you build lists automatically? You can. Can you prompt and write good emails? You can. You'll still need a good kick-ass cold caller to make calls. I know there are tools like Bland AI which make cold calls, but I don't think they can be used for cold outreach yet. But I think you need multiple channels, right? So I think the SDR role will evolve. It is already evolving. That is one thing. You will not need so many SDRs to execute the same amount of work let's say you needed 5 SDRs to do X amount of work 1 year back. Today, you can get it done with just one smart SDR. I think that's
Right.
how the role of SDR has evolved. That is one thing. The second thing is, I think a lot more companies will move towards Allbound, right? Because as you go up market, we are noticing that channels that are being deployed in silos don't work. Because everybody has been talking about sales enablement for a very long time. We've made life very easy for sellers. Create a Canva link and you can track who's looking at it. It gets Slack drop. You
Yeah.
get visitor de-anonymization. You've had so much of sales enablement. There's very little, stuff out there for buyer enablement. Because today you don't need a sale. If I have to buy a product, I don't need to talk to you to buy your product. Everything is available. Like reviews are available online.
Yeah.
Your website is basically your 24/7 salesperson. You should have the right kind of workflows in your website. You should be able to give me the right kind of information at the right points and places for which you should be, leaving some breadcrumbs here and there so that I can follow. And also pick up the breadcrumbs that I leave, right? So
Yeah.
70% of this happens even before I talk to you. And in the case of SaaS, in some cases, if it's like freemium or a very small, buy, I don't even need to talk to you. So I think we are in a time when buyer enablement is picking up and sales enablement is basically a thing of the past.
Yeah, that's a very interesting take. So as you mentioned that things are changing so quickly, like 45 days, 60 days. So what are some places where, our listeners can go to follow the latest trends and developments related to maybe the tools or techniques for cold outreach majorly?
Yeah. So obviously you have LinkedIn, right? The second is I think you should tap these Slack communities, Reddit forums. You'll be surprised by what kind of ideas you get from Reddit forums. The most weird and out there ideas, but not being utilized as much as, people. If you find something on LinkedIn, you can bet anything that it's being used by at least like a million people out there. But when you find something on Reddit, I don't think a lot of people are using it. Maybe that's why it tends to work more than the stuff that you see on LinkedIn because everybody is using it, right? So yeah, you have personally, I think LinkedIn, Slack communities, and Reddit forums.
Thank you, Suraj, for that. And with that, we wind up this episode of our podcast. So, where can people find you, Suraj, if they want to reach out to you?
I'm on
What's the
LinkedIn.
best place?
LinkedIn.
Awesome. Awesome. So, everyone can just follow up with Suraj on LinkedIn. I'm sure he shares some great information over there as well. And you can find the link to that in the description. So, thank you very much, Suraj, for
Thank you.
joining us.
Thank you, Sushant. Thank you, Sushant. Your pleasure.